coming to this, what we call a sunset. I think if HUAC were still alive, they'd have a heart attack if they ever saw this crowd. Old brand progressive of the past years is here to celebrate with us what Vivian has meant to all of us. So without any more ado than that, we have a program which is going to be, we want to take 45 minutes or an hour or so of some old friends and colleagues of hers to reminisce about it a little bit. Then we'll have some light refreshments, and hopefully we can all get together and console one another. I'd like to start off with Elaine Allison, whose essay in the middle of the pamphlet you read, and I think it's so appropriate because, one, she was a good friend of Vivian's, and she was with Vivian in the later stages, because she never gave up, really, and went with her to Nicaragua. And I mean, when you talk about a romantic person, how about somebody who can, at her age, run off in the middle of the night to have dinner with Dana Ortega and Fidel Castro at 4 a.m. and come back to tell Elaine about how romantic it was. So without any further ado, Elaine Allison.
I'd really so much like to thank the Hallinan family for inviting me to speak here today, and also for putting the article that I wrote about Vivian in the program, because Vivian was one of my dearest friends, really one of my dearest friends and my mentor, and I learned so much from her. She taught me so much about organizing and about political strategy, and we would stay up late at night collaborating and planning and figuring out who to put together with whom, and also gossiping. But it wasn't always like that. I didn't know I was going to be friends with Vivian the first time I met her, which was when we were both invited to Daniel Ortega's inauguration in 1984 in Nicaragua. The Sandinistas had invited many of their friends from around the world to join in that celebration, which was really an amazing moment because Nicaragua, which had dared to overthrow the Somoza dictatorship and which had dared to start a health system that served the poor and a literacy system that educated the poorest of the poor, was then, of course, under attack by Ronald Reagan's government here in the United States. And so they felt that the celebration of the inauguration of Daniel Ortega was really a victory that all people in solidarity with Nicaragua should share. And so many people from different groups were invited, and I was told by my friend Margarita Clark from the Cultural Workers Union that I was going to be rooting with Vivian Hallinan. And I was a little taken aback. And it wasn't only because Vivian was about 40 years older than me, and it wasn't only that where I put my backpack, she put her Gucci bag, and it wasn't only where I put my sandals, she had her high heels, and it wasn't only that in our bathroom, where I had thought of bringing maybe a mosquito repellent, she had a whole array of incredible cosmetics to make her look so gorgeous as she always did. It was really that I was kind of intimidated by Vivian, and I knew that her role in the movement was so great and so long that I really didn't know what to expect. I especially didn't know what to expect when she put out on the table her reading material, and it was, I think, a novel by Maeve Binchy. And I was so sure that I was going to really get to the bottom of what the Sandinista Revolution was all about and really understand its political origins. I put on my table a piece by Tomás Borque called From the FSLN, From the Peoples of the World, on Building a United Movement. That's what my reading material was going to be. And Vivian looked over and she said, "Oh, yes, I read that, and actually I hope I get to meet Tomás Borque because I wondered why he thought the protracted People's War struggle was a better strategy for victory than the insurrectional tendency." Well, of course, at that moment, I realized I had much to learn from Vivian Hallinan. On that journey, we went everywhere together. We went to the marketplace where we were looking for fresh bananas and pineapples, and she found hidden in the marketplace the Museum of the Revolution, which was where we spent the rest of the day. We went up to the mountains where we met with the mothers of the martyrs, the were mothers whose sons and daughters had been killed in the Contra War. And they gave us a red and black bandana, and they made Vivian a Sandinista there. One reason that people loved Vivian everywhere we went was because she always asked, what can we do? What can we actually do to change this? What can we do to make a difference? She wasn't just there to sort of bask in the glory of, at that time, the victorious Sandinista Revolution or other meetings. She really wanted to do something. And so, when the health system in Nicaragua was faltering because there was no medications, and when the old bus system was faltering because there were no spare parts, the Sandinistas told Vivian that the most important thing that we could do was to try to end the embargo, the United States embargo against Nicaragua. And so what did Vivian do? She thought, now, who could be the best voice to end the embargo? Well, of course it would be people who have businesses who maybe could make money in Nicaragua, and they would want to end the embargo. So she pulled together a delegation of business owners, some of whom are here today. I'm happy to see Dick Wertheimer and the Honegs went with us on that delegation. And we spoke afterwards to try to end the embargo. When peace activist Brian Wilson in 1986 tried to stop a shipload of arms to El Salvador, and was at the Concord Naval Weapons Station, and was run over and lost his legs and almost lost his life. And the Nicaraguans wanted to come. Vivian organized it so that Rosario Murillo, the First Lady of Nicaragua, was able to come with her 5 children and bring greetings to Brian Wilson and thanks for trying to use his life, to dare to use his life to try to stop Reagan's war in Central America. Everywhere we went in Central America, people called her compañera, comrade. She was the compañera of Nora Astorga, who she admired so much, who was the Nicaraguan ambassador to the United Nations, and made a special trip back to Nicaragua to see Nora when Nora was dying of breast cancer. And I remember that afternoon, Vivian was especially moved by what was going to happen to Nora's children, especially her teenagers, and especially the ones that Nora had taken in because her own sister had been killed in the Contra War. And Vivian was terribly moved by that because, above all, she was really a mother, and she really helped me, too, in raising my own sons, giving me advice not to worry when my son got in fights in school or even cut school, because look, her sons had cut school and got fights, and now they were attorneys and anthropologists and members of the board of supervisors, so, you know, it was okay, and Vivian was always there for me in that respect, too, and I really appreciate it. People wanted to meet her. Everyone wanted to meet her and know her opinion. When I would go to Nicaragua sometimes without her, other events around solidarity, and people would say, how is the compañera? I knew they meant Vivian. One time, we were told, when we were in, I shall say, an unnamed Central American country, that somebody very high up in the FMLN, the Salvadoran Revolutionary Movement, wanted to meet with Vivian. Vivian was probably about in her late 70s at that time, and we had to go, you know, Danny made arrangements so we could fly into Guatemala at like 4 o'clock in the morning. From there, somebody took us to some restaurant in the capital city. From there, somebody picked us up in a Jeep and took us to another neighborhood. And from there, you know, we went through one house and back from that house through a cornfield. And there, in the next house, we met Shafiq Kanda, who was the head of the Communist Party of El Salvador and a leader of the FMLN. When I said to Vivian, wow, what an ordeal, she said, oh, I did the same thing 40 years ago in the Philippines when the Hook revolutionaries wanted to meet me, so that's no problem. I just want to close by saying that when Vivian's health prevented her from going to protests and rallies and political meetings, she was very saddened by that. And I think she was even more saddened to know that there were not that many political rallies and protests and meetings going on. But I want to say to Vivian and to all of you who have been so active in the movement, I recognize people from so long ago, that Vivian really embodied what Tomás Borges said, that solidarity is the tenderness between people. Vivian made connections between all of us. Her political wisdom will guide me, and I know all of us, in everywhere we go. Every meeting I go, I always think, what would Vivian do? Who would Vivian want to put together to make this thing happen? I miss her so much. She was my collaborator, my conspirator, my gossiper, my sharer of dreams and plans, and I appreciate so much her family in inviting us all to share with us, to celebrate her life. In Nicaragua, when somebody died, and there were so many people who died during the Contra War, who were so brave to fight for the new society, we would always say presente. We would say Nora Astorga presente. So today I would like to ask you all to join me when I say Vivian Hallinan presente. Vivian Hallinan presente. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. And speaking of Nicaraguas and speaking of revolutionaries, Margarita Clark is here with us. Has come out from Washington to participate in this. And Rita Clark, if you'll come up, wants to say a few words about Vivian.
It's wonderful to see so many people present here honoring Vivian. I come from Washington because I have to come here to honor a woman I love and admire. And I'm also here for my daughter Margarita, who met Vivian before I did, who did some work here in San Francisco with Elaine and Friends of Nicaraguan Culture, and who Vivian had special affection for. For my brother, Miguel Descoto, and for the many people in Nicaragua whose life Vivian touched deeply. Some in high places, but many were ordinary people who had a dream. And Vivian shared that dream. To me, Vivian was larger than life and a great source of inspiration. She had talent, beauty, charm, but what moved me the most was her caring, her great capacity for helping this cause and that cause because it was just. And with one after another, her heart had an enormous capacity, and she could organize. She knew the ropes. Later on, I came to San Francisco. I met Vivian in Washington when she was working in the Mayor's National Conference. And she organized with the mayor here in San Francisco and Berkeley and many others. And they had a resolution. That resolution supported the dreams of the Nicaraguan people, and it was a great success. This is my first encounter with Vivian, and then we went out to dinner and talked, you know. And she invited me to come to San Francisco later, which I did a couple of times, but I saw her the next time in Nicaragua. And she was in her late 70s too then. And I admire her energy and her charm, and how when she was talking to somebody, she really was listening, attentive, and she shared those concerns and those dreams. We felt that she was one of us, you know. The other thing is, I remember going in a bus with her to Esteli, and not a very good road. And I, being about maybe 13, 14 years younger than her, was very tired. And she told me she was very tired. But when we got there and there was a crowd waiting for her, she shone. She's wonderful. She talked to people. She knew what she was talking about. And she was absolutely amazing to me. And I attribute that not so much to her talent and the many contacts that she had, but to that wonderful heart of hers. So today, I feel myself very lucky that I had the opportunity to meet Vivian and become her friend. I stayed several times at her home, and she shared a lot of her life about all the sons and the pictures and her husband and W.E.B. Du Bois. That picture with him in the beach, in the Caribbean, you know, and the many stories. And I just grew to love her. And I am honored to be here celebrating this life. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to ask one of my brothers to make some remarks. And we had a hard time deciding among us. We felt just one brother should actually have something to say. We had a hard time deciding, but finally we figured that Butch knew her longest. So, Patrick, if you come up and say something about your, and Patrick and she were always especially close.
Actually, I didn't want to speak because I make such a fool out of myself when I become emotional, and it's very hard not to be emotional. What really is lovely is seeing all our old friends. And I knew this was going to happen. And I tried to talk them out of it, but they made me do it anyway. But, you know, as I look back on Mom, and I started to make a list of the things in which she's shown. And the damn thing just kind of went on and on and on. So it was very hard for me to sort out just what I wanted to talk about. Now, Mom grew up poor, and she grew up a displaced child. She was handed off from family member to family member all through childhood. And she experienced abandonment. And rather than visit on her children the experiences of her own childhood, she used that as a template by which she would treat us just the opposite of the way she was treated. So we grew up with a great deal of love and affection. Now, it wasn't an easy road to hoe in my family. I mean, my father was a powerful force. He had his Irish roots, in which he distrusted power and authority. He hated oppression. And he was a tumultuous guy. And he raised us to be perfectly willing to take a swing at the world. But my mother, she was the moral and the political compass of our family. And you know, when we went through McCarthyism, when my father went to jail, it was my mother who kept us afloat. And when I think about her qualities, the two qualities which I respect in life more than any other are courage and loyalty. And my mother was the most courageous person I have ever met. There was nothing that daunted her when it was the right thing to do. And that is why she went to Chile. That's why she went to jail. That's why wherever she went in life, and she saw unfairness and oppression, she took a stand. And loyalty, if you don't think that living 65 years with my father, so it was my dad who was the titular head of the family, but it really was my mother who got us through the shoals of life. And I look around this room and I see all the dear friends I grew up with. My mother's friends, my father's friends, all in the movement. Marxists.
Well, thank you, Butch, on behalf of all of us. Thank you. Another old friend of Vivian's is here, Sue Bierman. Sue, would you come up?
Well, she was all of that, Patrick. And I know she's just a huge, huge loss in all your lives. But she was so beautiful in spirit and everything else. But for me, I go to the movies all the time. And for me, she was more beautiful to look at than any movie star. One night, I think it was at the Hilton Hotel, I came up an escalator, and as I turned a corner, Vivian was sitting in this huge, sort of this back chair, looking so stunningly beautiful. You just couldn't believe it. And that she carried that beauty and everything she did was what was so beautiful about her. Also, she loved to shop, and I loved to shop. One day, Vivian and I happened to have lunch. I don't remember why, it was several years ago. Maybe we'd been somewhere, I don't know, but I guess we planned the lunch. And afterwards, she was going to Elizabeth Arden, and she'd seen a suit she didn't think she could afford. I said, oh, I'll bet you can. And I don't know if she bought it or not, but she was such a fun, wonderful woman. This is a certificate of honor from the Board of Supervisors. And I loved serving with you, Terrence, on that board. There haven't been many like you since. And it's honoring Vivian Hallinan, beautiful, loving wife of Vincent, mother of her wild Irish rose, outstanding advocate for peace, justice, and civil rights, and signed by all the supervisors.
She got out of San Bruno jail, spending 30 days for sitting in at the Sheraton Palace. The first thing she did was go get her hair done. She really did keep things in perspective. And in the area of old friends, we have another old friend of Vivian's. Vivian, I mean, as everybody who knows her knows, she was not a singular person, and Butch said she was a Marxist. She believed in many causes, and one of them was peace, and one of her old friends in that is with us today, Alice Hamburg. Alice, would you like to come up?
Thank you very much. One disadvantage of being number 3 or 4 is that just about everything has been said. But of course, about Vivian, you can never say everything because there is so much to tell. And I am going to show some favoritism as far as the Hallinans are concerned, in that Cale and I were fellow travelers during the Vietnam War. We worked very hard on all the big marches and all the events that we were putting on. And then, later, I worked with Vivian in the peace movement. And so maybe I'm the only one here who's who has worked with 2 generations of Hallinans, and I think that that is quite a distinctive honor that I have had. I'd like to call your attention to the photos which I brought, which are, I hope they're still standing, and among them are, of course, Vivian is in the center, and among them is a photo with Nora Astorga, and that was a very happy event. One time that I was able to extend my hospitality to Vivian and to her dear friend. Nora had been a fighter in the underground in Nicaragua, Sandinista, and later on the ambassador to the United Nations. And after that, Vivian sent me a very lovely note of appreciation, and that was very true of Vivian. I would like to remember Vivian not only for the glamorous jobs and the events in her life, but also the hours that we spent sitting next to each other at various meetings, peace meetings, of course. For instance, in San Francisco at 50 Oak Street, the rather lengthy meeting sometimes, a Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, and then later on we would take a trip to Philadelphia where we would attend a national board meeting of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Vivian was very creative, and she was mainly responsible for a program which Women's International League launched called Feed the Cities, Not the Pentagon. And she was able to lead, along with Jeanette Rankin, former congresswoman, 5,000 women up the street in snowy Washington to demand that the government change its priorities and stop wasting all the money on the Pentagon and doing something about the cities. So, and not only did she lead the march and plan all of that, but she also got then Mayor Moscone to introduce her at a national mayor's meeting in Milwaukee, and she presented the same idea there, and the mayors approved. But I haven't seen a great change, so that means that we still have to keep working to turn things around. Without Vivian, we're all going to have to work a great deal harder. I'd like to say just a few things about Vivian through the years. I'm not going to be very lengthy. When they lived in Marin, they entertained such people as Robeson and DeVos, and at the same time, at another location in Marin County, they would have these annual picnics, swimming pool, events to raise money for the people's world. So they always, she and Ben and the boys, always had their hand in doing something good for humanity. After they moved to San Francisco, her Russian Hill apartment was the location of many, many events. And almost anybody who had a good cause might be met there and was given the final reception. There were many causes, as you know, that Vivian always worked for. What I would like to mention also is about Vivian as a mother and grandmother. She was a very, very devoted mother and grandmother. Her boys have returned that appreciation, and I know on many occasions friends of Vivian would call to make an evening appointment with her, and she might say, "Oh no, I can't go tonight because one of the boys is coming for his customary preparation of my dinner, so I can't go out tonight." Well, I have two daughters who are very devoted, but they never put me on their weekly schedule. So that was one point in Vivian's favor. And today, I was a little hesitant about bringing up this point, but after the speeches I've heard so far, I think I shall do so. Okay. In regard to Vivian's home, I'd like to quote Khalil Gibran, a Lebanese writer, who said, "She built her house with affection and changed all things with the breath of her own spirit." And what I'm going to mention is that right now, U.S. bombs are being rained on the people of former Yugoslavia and Iraq. And I do not see a great movement against this atrocity that is going on. It isn't only Milosevic who is performing these horrible deeds. And I don't know whether we're waiting for the young generation to step up and carry on this battle or not. I think we have to have a conference among us to see what we're going to do about it. I'm going to but things do not have to be that way forever. I'm going to close with the thoughts of the poet Stephen Vincent Benet, slightly abridged. Our earth is but a small star in the great universe. If we choose, we can make it, untroubled by war, hunger, or fear, undivided by senseless distinctions of race, color, or theory. This is what Vivian would want.
Thank you, Alice. I don't mean to contradict you, but I don't think there's a person in this room that hasn't worked with at least 2 generations of the Hallinan family on something or another. And speaking of longtime friends of the family and of Vivian, I'd like to next ask Edith Jenkins to come up and tell us a little bit about some of your reminiscences of Vivian. And the Jenkinses and the Hallinans go back a long, long time. Edith, nice to work together.
Thank you, Kay, and thank you for that introduction, because this is just what I'm going to do. I think there's been wonderful political reports of what Vivian did, of her vigor and her dedication, and I want to talk just about a few personal reminiscences of my relationship with the family. I met Vivian 50 years ago when she was pregnant with Danny, and the first time I heard her speak was at a meeting. I don't remember what it was a luncheon, and she was speaking how she was going to have this child, she would have the best possible care, and she wanted to work to see that women throughout the world were entitled to the same care that she was going to get in having her child. In trying to describe what I so loved about Vivian, I realized it was 2 qualities about her. Her courage on the one hand, and as the first speaker said, her tenderness, which was a very lovely quality about Vivian. And it was both manifested itself both in political terms, which I'll speak of later, and in personal terms. It was also the vigor with which she lived, the qualities of this courage and commitment to social values, the qualities of loyalty on a personal level, about which Brooks spoke. Other speakers knew her political history much more closely than I do, so I will go on with just a few reminiscences. During the period that Vincent was in jail, which as you all remember was because he defended Harry Bridges in one of the cases where they were trying to deport him to his native Australia, Vivian was living in an unprotected, large estate in Ross, and I say unprotected for a particular reason. At one point, she had a threatening call that Danny was going to be kidnapped. We all thought that it was a political act of terrorism, and I think it worried us particularly because I think we all felt we could stand attacks on ourselves, but we didn't know what would happen if they attacked our children. But then the phone call came asking her to meet this man, or rather to drop off a large sum of money for this man, otherwise Danny would be kidnapped. So Vivian went out in a car with the money, and in the back of the car a policeman was hiding, and she dropped off the money, and then the man was arrested. When he was arrested, it turned out that he was a very young man, a soldier, who had been at one of the parties, the fundraising parties for a good cause at the place in Ross, and he wanted money because his mother had cancer, and he was very poor. When Vivian found this to be the case, she refused to have him prosecuted, and this was an example of her humanity and her tenderness. Shortly thereafter, the courts tied up all the Hallinan money, and Vivian was forced to move into a small place in San Francisco. In a swift succession, a variety of terrible personal events happened to her, where her courage and a total lack of self-pity were manifest. She was diagnosed with cancer, and she required surgery. Danny came down with polio. There was never heard from Vivian one word of self-pity or complaint, or failure of courage. At some point, I cannot place the time, a man entered her house in an attempted rape. She brandished her abdominal surgery scar, told him that cancer was contagious, and frightened him away. Vivian never lost sight of the large issues, but she was never oblivious of the repercussions of the period on her children. It's hard for people who didn't live through it, though I could see by the faces that most of us did, and the kind of terror that was kind of quiet terror against children during the McCarthy era, where teachers would persecute them, where friends would refuse to associate with them, where the mothers of friends would forbid their children to associate with them. I remember at one time when Vivian felt that Kale was undergoing a lot of stress to this, she took time to take him alone to Chicago, to Lake Tahoe for the weekend, to talk to and to try to console him and counsel him. This was a period in which the friendship between Vivian and me really flourished, because nobody would invite somebody with 6 children over for dinner. And Dave was traveling, my husband was traveling on labor defense, and nobody would invite somebody with 4 children over for dinner. And neither Vivian nor I wanted to leave our children a good deal during that period for obvious reasons. So we would call each other at dinner time and say, "What are you doing tonight?" "Nothing." "Let's pile the kids into a car and go out to play with them at the beach." Do you remember that? We would all go out to play with them at the beach and have a hamburger and play the games out there. I don't remember, I think it was in this period of sort of forced independence that Vivian began to be aware of her own strength and her militancy, her own capacity for political leadership in the peace and in the women's movement. I don't remember at what point her distinguished friendships were developed, but she became close to Coretta King, to W.E.B. Du Bois, to his wife, the writer Shirley Graham, to Paul Robeson, to the national leaders in the women's peace movement. I hear that Vivian was ready to die, that life had diminished to a succession of medical crises. Yet I find it hard to be philosophical about her going. I think of her presence, her radiant smile, her vital energy. I shall not look upon her like again.
Thank you, Edith. And those of all of us in my family remember during the 50s, one little enclave of friendliness was around the corner. And Harry Bridges lived on Schrader Street. Lou Goldblatt was there, and Joe Johnson was there. And another resident of that area who lives still on Woodside is with us at this time, an old friend of Vivian's. I'd like to ask Agar Jakes to say a few words.
I, like some of the others who come up here, would like to, I have some prepared remarks, but to start out with something, add something to them. I'm actually probably coming here with this from a little different perspective than a lot of the speakers you've had here. My wife and I came to San Francisco in 1950, and I was raised in a Republican household, and I did have some Democratic leanings by the time I got here. So my contact with Vivian over the years was a learning experience, and that sort of sets up for you my beginning of my prepared remarks here. I didn't meet Vivian Hallinan in 1950, but I became aware of her then when my wife Diane and I were seated in the balcony of the ILW auditorium on Golden Gate Avenue, where a goodly crowd had gathered to hear Mrs. Paul Robeson talk about her recent trip to China and her impressions of the new communist government. We looked down on the stage at Harry Bridges and a collection of beefy longshoremen, some still in their work overalls and white caps, and seated there among this mass of masculinity was Vivian Hallinan. Vivian Hallinan, you know, was one attractive woman, and her dress code, although suitable and fitting, was certainly would have been acceptable in Hillsborough at that time. So she was quite an attraction for me, especially when she was sitting there. She was completely at ease while she joined in the affable conversation of those around her, and as speakers used phrases like dictatorship of the proletarian and proletarian ethics, I glanced quickly at her. She seemed quite comfortable and supportive. And at one time, Mrs. Robeson said the Soviets had referred to her husband's tumultuous upstate New York concert in the late 1940s as the beginning of the American Bolshevik Revolution. I quickly glanced at Vivian, and she seemed not the least bit disturbed. Without having spoken a word to her and without hearing her speak, I was convinced she was someone of note, a compelling figure with enlightened credentials. And when I finally met her and got to know her, I was not disappointed in my assessment. Vivian Hallinan was a wife, a mother, a radical leader, a woman of intelligence, dedication, compassion, and courage. She was a socialist who mastered capitalism and used her resources to diffuse the economic violence of a market economy. She fought to protect the civil and constitutional rights of the unprotected. She was an advocate in the struggle to end privilege, which also led her to support movements that would have limited her own self-achieved affluence. Her vision did not end at our borders or the water's edge. She was a vibrant ally of the Sandinista movement and the founder of the Esteli San Francisco Sister Committee. A personal friend of Daniel Ortega, she lent her formidable talents to aid the Sandinistas in their efforts to establish universal health care, education for all, and bring a new respect for women based on equality. Vivian Hallinan never sought personal aggrandizement or recognition for her achievements. Her reward was in the progress of her struggles. We have been blessed by her presence. She was a friend and a beautiful, beautiful human being, inside and out.
Thank you, Agar. Thank you very much. And we have another longtime friend of my mother's here, a woman who is certainly a well-respected person in her own right, and that's Nova Maxwell. Nova, would you like to come up?
Well, I'm sorry Vivian is dead, but guys, I'm happy to be here today because I didn't know all of these good things about her that I've heard today. And we haven't heard so many things about Vivian. I know why it is that she's one of the first white people I dare to call friend. And I can see plainly why. She was a friend. She was a friend of all people. Where I came from in Louisiana, white and black people didn't openly call themselves friends, each other friends. It was, you have to be secret about it because it might punish you in some way. White people were ostracized sometimes and just a little bit short than murder, that black people were murdered. But Vivian was a true woman for peace and freedom. Now, I've known many people that worked for peace and freedom over the years, but so many of them got tired, they give up, they call it burnout. But Vivian never seemed to burn out. She just constantly kept peace and freedom in the forefront. Ever since I've known her, and for every issue, she's always, where is freedom? And where is justice? Justice is what she's out there for. And she didn't have any price tag on justice. And there was nothing she wouldn't do. She would go as far as was necessary for justice and peace. And I'm telling you, I just don't know what, things get worse and worse every day for justice and peace and equality. And not enough people is working on it. So many people have gone, and so many people have burned out. But unless we who are here, all of these people I know have been working for peace and justice for so long, you've got to continue. As a matter of fact, you've got to get other people to join you in this search for peace and freedom and justice. Otherwise, what will our world come to? All that we have worked so hard and the things that we have struggled so hard to do. We have to, you know, Vivian told me a few years ago, she said, she was thinking about dying, you know. She said, but hey, I got to hang on a little longer. Something was about to happen. She had several things to do, so she couldn't die now. Isn't that something? I tell you, and so many things we would laugh about when we were together. Everybody else, I bet you, if it happened to you, would be crying. Vivian and I had so much fun laughing at ourselves and laughing at things that had happened to us, you know. But she never gave up her search for freedom and justice. And so many of you in this group, you're not too old. I'm going to be 80, by the way, this year in August. You know, I'm never going to get old. If I live to be 100, I'll never get old. And I, like Vivian, I don't intend to live beyond the day that I will seek justice and love mercy. Thank you.
Well, those of you who knew, and everybody here knew Vivian well, I mean, this is really a wonderful, wonderful audience. are here, I think if HUAC was still in existence, they'd have a heart attack if they ever saw this. Of all the progressives, young, old, and many years in San Francisco, and as many of you know, one of the, particularly controlling the purse strings in our family, one of the things that Vivian always was very involved in was endorsing and supporting political candidates who she felt compatible with. Of course, most of the people who she felt compatible with weren't elected to office, but along the way, a few of them were. And she had her special friendships, George Moscone, the three Burton brothers, and one who she always had a special relationship with, of a friendship as well as a political nature. And we asked to appear here as Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Terrence. First off, I want to extend the condolences of my family to the Hallinan family, to the boys. How old do you have to get before you're not called the boys? To the boys and to the grandchildren who meant, the family meant the most to Vivian. I can't think of a higher compliment, personally or politically, than to have been invited to say some words here today in honor and celebration of the life of Vivian Hallinan. I know every single one of you out there wants to be up here because you have stories to tell about Vivian, and they're all positive. But that's a special bond that we have among us and that we will always have among us, that we respected her, we knew her, we loved her. Everyone talked about Vivian having beauty, having intellect, having energy, having integrity, and we all know she also had and will always have the respect of every person who knew her. I've had the special privilege of talking about Vincent and Vivian on the floor of the Congress of the United States. When Vincent left us, it was with a certain mischief that I went to the floor to initially inform my colleagues of the impact of Vincent and Vivian. I talked both the lion and the lioness at that time, and then to follow up so sadly with Vivian's passing recently. I always like to say to my constituents, although I'm here today as a friend, I won't say anything to you here that I won't say on the floor of the Congress, but I must say the word mischief always creeps into it when I go to the floor to talk about the Hallinans, because it was, as Agar said about Vivian, she beat capitalists at their own game. Everything she did so well. Today, I saw in the New York Times, they had the front page cover of the magazine section said, Women of the Millennium, and the impact and changing role of women in this 1,000 years. And I didn't, I just saw it and I'll read it later, but I saw some names that people were contributing to it and people that they had talked about, and I thought, that is what Vivian Hallinan is, a woman of the millennium. Everything she did excellent. She was not only a loving, personal, close to her children mother, she was a matriarch. She instilled her children with a great vision about our country, and she kept the ship afloat by being a successful businesswoman. And of course, she was not only an activist, she was a leader who made a difference. So every path she went down effectively and as a leader. She certainly was a leader in her own generation. She was a mentor to our generation. She was an icon to my children's generation, our children's generation, and she certainly was and will always be an inspiration to all of us. Christine, my daughter Christine and I were talking about Vivian because they were pals too, and she was saying, Mom, I'll never forget when Vivian asked Kimmy Burton and me and Christine to go with her to Nicaragua. They were about 20, 21 years old at the time, not even out of college, and I said, Vivian wants to take you to Nicaragua. I think it was the 10th anniversary of the revolution, whatever, some anniversary. And Vivian wants to take you and Kimmy to Nicaragua? And she said, oh, Mom, you don't have to worry about Vivian, because Vivian was thrilled even then. And I said, I'm not worried about Vivian. It's the two of you I'm worried about. Vivian, 2 or 3 years earlier, had been gassed by the Pinochet government in Chile for speaking out for justice and freedom in Chile. So I wasn't worried about Vivian being able to deal with the challenges of traveling to Central America at that time. And I hope it was a comfort to Vivian in the later days, because those of us who had a chance to ever speak to her knew that she was impatient with infirmity. I think that was, we knew she was impatient with injustice, but she had some comments to make about infirmity. But I hope it was a comfort to her at that time to see Pinochet being holed up in some home in England while courts and different countries. And I hope it was a comfort for her it came too late, but to see that our country was moving toward a place where even our president would apologize to the people of Guatemala for our role, and the terrible, terrible role that the U.S. played in Guatemala in the past 2 generations. And I'm sorry that you didn't see, but just on the floor on Thursday, we passed an amendment to the intelligence bill that said that called, and it passed, imagine it passed, calling upon the United States to make known all of its records about its role in the assassination of President Allende. So that now we have to make it happen. But in any event, Vivian's work goes on. She did everything she did well, but her work is not finished, and it's up to us to finish, to move it along. Just on Vincent for a moment, because it's hard for me to separate Vincent and Vivian, although my personal relationship is with Vivian. I remember being so complimented when I was an officer in the Democratic Party. Anytime they would come to our home for an event, because they validated any cause they associated themselves with, and they brought honor to any event, not to mention fun and glamour, to any event they attended. They were a major force in the political life and the personal lives of so many of us here. So this is a real transition. I felt very sad, as I'm sure many of you did today, coming here today. Somehow I thought Vivian would live forever. And somehow she will. Because not only was she a pioneer, she's also further to that a trailblazer. Every person who works for economic and social justice, every person who works for peace and freedom, every person who works for a fairer world, a world where we will make war obsolete, every person who goes down that path walks in the footsteps of Vivian Hallinan. And so it is with the indulgence of Vincent that I say, I thank God for the life of Vivian Hallinan.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and I do feel assured that Vivian will go on. I know her genes will be in sit-in demonstrations and picket lines in the Bay Area for many generations to come. And that ends our programmatic part of today's events. I invite everybody to stick around and talk to one another. We have some light refreshments, and thank you for coming and joining us in this celebration of Vivian Hallinan's great life. Thank you.
It's a movie.
I don't know what we're supposed to say. The discussing it more. I'm glad old Alabama got it in. Thanks, Robbie. You're welcome. Nice to see you. Yeah, I'm in the city. He was, when I left graduate school and went to work.
Just